Dan Goldman obliterates GOP lies in real time. Kristi Noem left speechless. Republicans in full meltdown mode on live TV. Welcome to The Clip, where truth speaks louder than MAGA fiction. Let's dive into how Democrats just crushed the chaos.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize Mr. Goldman for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go back to Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia's case, Madam Secretary. But my first question for you is a pretty simple one. It's basic civics. Which branch of government does the Constitution give the authority to interpret what the law is, the judiciary or the executive branch?
Sir, going forward, the interpretation of the law, you make the laws in this body. The judicial branch makes sure that they have integrity and they're applied properly to individuals.
So I'm just going to take that as the judiciary branch. Now, let's focus for a second on what the judiciary branch has said about this case. We know the Supreme Court has said 9-0 that, notwithstanding your statements under oath here today, that Mr. Kilmar Abrego Garcia was afforded due process, he was in fact not afforded due process, because then if he were, you would have seen the withholding order that did not permit him to be deported to El Salvador. Now you allege, and I guess the Attorney General alleges, that he's a member of MS-13. That may very well be the case. And if he is, now that that is a foreign terrorist organization, certainly the immigration laws would allow him, and in fact require him, to be deported. I certainly would support that. But the problem that we have here is what you allege, what Ms. Green alleges, what the Attorney General alleges, is not the judiciary. You don't get to decide whether or not he is an MS-13 member. And you don't have to take my word for it, because Judge Wilkinson, a Fourth Circuit judge, very conservative, addressed this argument. He said, the government asserts that Abrego Garcia is a terrorist and a member of MS-13. Perhaps, but perhaps not. Regardless, he is still entitled to due process. If the government is confident in its position, it should be assured that position will prevail in proceedings to terminate the withholding of removal order. Will you commit right now to give Mr. Abrego Garcia that process where you can prove your allegation that he is a member of MS-13?
Congressman, that judge that you just quoted did not say he was not a member of MS-13. Who did say that he was a member of MS-13 was law enforcement officers that encountered this individual.
Yeah, he knows that. This is a Fourth Circuit judge. He knows all of what the evidence is, and he's saying if that evidence. So you're not going to commit to follow this order. You won't commit to follow this court order.
By the way, he identified
Madam Secretary,
himself.
I reclaim my time. Stop filibustering. Stop filibustering.
By gang members of MS-13.
Will you give Mr. Abrego Garcia the due process that the Supreme Court and Judge Wilkinson has required you to give him?
Abrego Garcia is an El Salvador resident who is in his home country. If he were to come back to this country, he would be immediately removed again.
How do you know?
He has received and been treated appropriately,
so
sir, and he is not.
How can you say he's been treated appropriately if the Supreme Court has ruled 9-0? 9-0 that he hasn't been treated appropriately? Why is your opinion better and have more authority than the Supreme Court?
Investigators, 2 judges, an immigration court that all said he was MS-13 and was removed from this country.
But you understand, that is you saying that. That is you saying that.
That is them saying that. This
no.
And law
that is you
officers
making that
the
determination.
Case they built against him. If you don't
the
trust
court has considered all that. The judge has considered all that, Madam Secretary. And if you would be quiet, because I'm reclaiming my time, you are not following this court order. But let's focus on the court order, because this opinion also says that to facilitate, which the Supreme Court is requiring, is an active verb. It requires that steps be taken. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia to allow him to get due process? Abrego
Garcia is in his home country.
What steps have you taken?
If your continued advocacy for him were to...
I'm not advocating for him.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
advocating for a
Absolutely.
court order, Madam
You've gone to the
Secretary.
mat for this
The
man
court
who
order
has terrorized
says
people
that
in
you
traffic
must take
with human
steps
beings.
to follow the court order. You are here under oath. What steps have you taken to return Mr. Abrego Garcia pursuant to this court order?
It's got to be extremely discouraging to be one of your constituents. To see you fight for a terrorist like this and not fight for them is extremely alarming to me.
I'm fighting for due process, and that's under the Constitution.
Gentleman's
and you
time
should
has
fight too for due
expired.
process.
The gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Green for 5 minutes questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Democrats have spent the last 4 years terrorizing Americans with their open border policies. They flooded our communities with over 13 million illegals from over 170 countries and territories who invaded our borders, raped our women and children, and murdered our own people. It's shocking to hear them to continue to defend cartels, MS-13, and terrorists today. Democrats claimed over and over again that legislation was needed to fix the problems that they created, yet to this day, no new border legislation has been enacted, and border crossings are down 93%. It was just reported that according to CBP, only 5 aliens were temporarily released into the United States in all of April. Only 5. This is compared to the 68,000 released in April of 2024 under the Biden administration. Thank you, Secretary Noem, for your great work and your leadership. This is truly saving America. There's nothing Democrats love more than defending the cartels, the criminals, and the rapists, and now we finally have a president in the White House and an administration that defends the American people. As you're aware, Secretary Noem, CISA previously developed a censorship laundering scheme through its counter mis, dis, and malinformation, MDM, efforts that suppress conservative opinions and went after President Trump's supporters. Members of Congress, senators, including myself, were permanently banned. I was permanently banned on Twitter under this. What started as an election interference campaign eventually developed into censoring issues well beyond the election and COVID and climate change. Through their NGO partnerships, tickets were created on posts they thought were misinformation and subsequently sent to social media platforms with recommendations for them to be censored. Would you please provide an update on your efforts to investigate the severity of MDM efforts during the Biden regime, and what steps are you taking to ensure CISA will never again serve as the United States government's ministry of truth?
Yeah. No, thank you, Congressman. The CISA definitely was so far off mission, they forgot what their purpose clearly was. The CISA was created to hunt down bad actors and to harden our systems, to support local infrastructure, critical infrastructure that makes this country run, and those small and medium-sized businesses that don't have the resources to make sure that their software programs, their technology was secure from hackers and from bad actors around the world. Instead, what they were doing by out there deciding what was truth, what wasn't truth, censoring what people could say, was not their mission whatsoever. And so we have stopped those activities. We have refocused our resources back onto the cybersecurity mission and ensured that CISA is cooperating with our local and state individuals and businesses to make sure that we're truly being proactive at not just hardening our systems, but stopping the attacks that we have from countries that hate us. So the Ministry of Truth, as what CISA was operating before, was wrongful actions that were taken by employees of this administration, the last administration, to go after political targets, to manipulate the information that Americans were receiving, and that has stopped. We have fallen far behind in what we've been able to do as far as cooperating with other intelligence agencies and with those at the state level to make sure that we're being proactive. And that's one thing that we have focused extremely hard on in the last several months, is ensuring that those relationships are built back up, that we're partnering with private businesses to get the support that we need to make sure that we are hardening America's systems, because we're vulnerable to our weakest link. And oftentimes our weakest link is that small business or individual that ties into our largest systems.
Yes, thank you. No American should be censored by their government for their political beliefs and their statements. Thank you for that. Also, the Trump administration has committed to reuniting unaccompanied alien children lost or trafficked under the Biden-Harris administration back to their families and guardians. What efforts is DHS taking to ensure that these vulnerable children are safely reunited with their loved ones? Because the Biden administration lost hundreds of thousands of children.
Yes, absolutely. We know that there was upwards to over 300,000 children that were lost during the last administration. So President Trump has made it a priority of every cabinet secretary and agency to make sure those children are located, that they are returned to safety. As you know, the refugee program and sponsors were greatly abused under the previous administration, and the Department of HHS is bringing some integrity back to that program and making sure that these children are cared for appropriately and that someone is watching over them that truly has their best interests at heart, that really truly cares for them as a family member. I would say over 5,000 have been found, and our HSI individuals and law enforcement officers are continuing to identify them.
Gentlelady's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Ramirez for 5 minutes of questioning.
Dan Goldman didn't just question Secretary Noem. He dismantled her argument with surgical precision. In a 5-minute exchange that should be studied in every law school in America, Goldman held the line for the Constitution while Noem fumbled, backpedaled, and doubled down on disinformation. At the heart of Goldman's takedown was one simple word: due process. You remember that, right? It's in the Constitution, the thing Republicans like to wave around when they're banning books or attacking trans kids, but conveniently ignore when it holds them accountable. Goldman calmly and relentlessly pointed out that the Supreme Court of the United States unanimously ruled that the Department of Homeland Security violated due process when it deported Mr. Abrego Garcia. 9-0. That means even the conservative justices agreed. What DHS did was unconstitutional. But Noem, like every Trump disciple, doesn't let facts or rulings from the highest court in the land get in her way. She dodged. She spun. She quoted law enforcement over judges, as if badges replace gavels, as if hearsay trumps legal precedent. Goldman wasn't having it. He pulled no punches. Why is your opinion more valid than the Supreme Court's? He demanded. And there it was. The silence, the stammering, the moment the entire MAGA legal fantasy collapsed on live television. Let's be clear. Goldman wasn't defending a criminal. He was defending the rule of law, and that terrifies Republicans. Because when you're used to bending the system for political revenge, the idea of fair process feels like a threat. And then came the line that deserves to be etched into the walls of Congress. I'm not advocating for a person. I'm advocating for a court order. That's the kind of clarity and courage America needs. But what did we get instead? We got Marjorie Taylor Greene and her parade of fear-mongering. We got wild accusations about Democrats loving cartels, defending rapists, and flooding America with 13 million illegals. It wasn't a hearing. It was a hate rally in disguise. Republicans are no longer hiding their agenda. They want power without accountability. They want to criminalize immigrants, censor speech, weaponize the government against their enemies, and then cry free speech when they're fact-checked. Greene used her time not to engage in policy, but to peddle paranoia. She painted immigrants as monsters, Democrats as traitors, and herself as a victim of the Ministry of Truth. A laughable rebranding of fact-checking she can't survive. This is how far gone the GOP is. They've gone from the party of Lincoln to the party of lunacy. And let's talk about Noem, who, by the way, sat there parroting every Trumpian trope with the dead-eyed precision of a propaganda bot. She deflected on court rulings, praised law enforcement over constitutional order, and proudly admitted DHS refused to follow a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. Let that sink in. The executive branch, under Trump loyalists, knowingly violated a Supreme Court order, and they're bragging about it. But Goldman didn't just expose Noem, he exposed the rot in the Republican Party's soul. A party that's fine with overturning elections, fine with ignoring court orders, fine with using children, immigrants, and conspiracy as political tools. And then they dare accuse Democrats of lawlessness? It's projection 101. Goldman's defense of due process wasn't just about one case. It was about defending the rule of law in an era where the GOP is hell-bent on replacing it with authoritarian chaos. And when Noem tried to imply that defending due process was somehow fighting for a terrorist, Goldman shot that lie down with thunderous clarity. This isn't about defending criminals. It's about defending democracy from people like you. It's terrifying that Republicans now treat the Constitution as optional, unless it can be weaponized against their enemies. Goldman, by contrast, reminded America that principles matter most when they're inconvenient. But of course, the GOP brought backup, their usual bag of lies. MTG again trotted out the false claim that Biden lost 300,000 migrant children. That's a lie. What she leaves out, intentionally, is that it was the Trump administration that ripped kids from their parents and lost them in a bureaucratic black hole. Biden is cleaning up Trump's mess, not creating it. And yet, Green thanks Secretary Noem for saving America. From what? From court orders? From fact-checking? From the truth? You want to know what's actually saving America? It's leaders like Dan Goldman who still believe in the Constitution even when it's hard, who fight for justice even when it's politically risky, who understand that due process is what separates us from dictatorships. Meanwhile, the GOP is busy building their own fantasy government, one where judges don't matter, facts are censored, and racism is policy. Goldman forced the truth into the room, and it made Republicans squirm. That's why they're panicking. That's why they're doubling down. That's why they're smearing judges, slandering immigrants, and pretending they're victims. Because when they can't win on the law, they turn to the mob. But America saw it. Millions of us watched the hearing. We saw the calm, methodical takedown. We saw a Democrat fight for truth while the GOP threw tantrums and recycled hate speech. And we're not forgetting it. This wasn't just a good moment for Dan Goldman. It was a masterclass in how to hold power accountable. It was what every Democrat should be doing, using facts like scalpels to cut through the MAGA fog. So let this be a lesson. The path forward isn't appeasement. It's confrontation. Not with shouting, but with truth. Not with cruelty, but with conviction. Not with fear, but with facts. Because the next election isn't just about policies. It's about preserving the republic itself. Dan Goldman showed us how it's done. Now it's up to us to follow. Thank you for watching. If you believe truth, law, and democracy still matter, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and share this with every voter you know. We're not done yet, not by a long shot. The fight is now, and we are wide awake.